All right, same type of problem as the you try number one. This one looks tricky. I think it's actually slightly easier. But the reason it looks tricky is because you can't actually see that there are three roots here, but there are. And the three roots are x equals -1, x equals positive the square root of 5, and x equals negative square root 5. So this plus or minus right here is kind of misleading because it makes it look like that's one root, but it's actually two roots, the positive and the negative. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the shortcut. I'm not actually going to write everything out this time. I'm just going to switch the sign. So x equals -1, so when I put it into the parentheses, it's going to be x plus 1. For the purple one, I have a positive root 5, so it's going to be x minus root 5. And then for the teal one, it's going to be the opposite, so x plus root 5. And then this all equals 0. Now this looks complicated because we have radicals, but as long as you choose the correct two to start with, it's going to make your life considerably easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two. You always want to take things that are conjugates of each other, and conjugates means that they're identical except that their signs are opposite. So this sign and this sign are opposite, but otherwise the terms are the same. So I'm going to go over, actually I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to multiply x minus the square root of 5 times x plus the square root of 5. So I'm going to FOIL. All right, so x times x would be x squared. X times the square root of 5 is x times the square root of 5. There's really not much else you can do there. Negative 5 times x, negative the square root of 5 times x would be negative x square root 5. And then the square root of negative square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is negative square root 25, but the square root of 25 is 5, so it just turns into -5. Now what happens here is these two terms are the exact same thing but opposite signs, so they cancel each other out. And all I have left here is x squared minus 5. So I'm going to write that down, x squared minus 5 in parentheses. And then I'm going to copy down this pink parentheses, the x plus 1. So in the previous example, we had to FOIL two binomials, which turned into a trinomial, which we then had to multiply by another binomial. This one is still two binomials again, so we get to FOIL again. So x times x squared is x cubed. X times -5 is -5x. 1 times x squared is just plain x squared. And then 1 times -5 is -5. Now the only thing I have left to do is write this in the correct order. I want to make sure that my highest exponents go first, and then we work our way down to the lowest. So the highest exponent here is x cubed. The next highest is x squared, and it's positive, so I would have plus x squared. The next term would be -5x, and then -5, and then I want to put my equals 0 at the end. So here's my equation. Now before I go to my calculator, there are two features of the graph that I want to put on there. The first is where the zeros are. Now I don't know exactly what the square root of 5 is. That's something we're going to have to estimate. So I just told you I'm not going to use my calculator, but I'm going to. So I'm going to do the square root of 5, just so I can see what the decimal is. So it's about 2.2. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my graph here, and I'm going to make a little note to myself that the square root of 5 is approximately 2.2, and then that means the negative square root of 5 would be approximately -2.2. So when I put in all of my zeros, I'm just putting in some tick marks here. So my first 0, and I'll actually use the same colors, was at -1, so that would go here. My second 0 was the positive square root of 5, so I'm going to go to 2.2, so I'm just going to say it's about there. It doesn't have to be perfect, just kind of a good estimate. And then the negative square root of 5 would be -2.2, so that would be about here. So I've got my 3 zeros labeled, and then the second thing that I need on there is my y-intercept. And remember, the y-intercept is pretty easy. It's just whatever your constant value is in your equation, so it's at -5. So I'm going to go down 5, and I'm going to label, or I'm going to plot a point here at -5. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my equation that I just created, and I'm going to put it into my calculator and make sure that everything matches up. And then I can also kind of get a feel for what the graph looks like. So I'm going to go to y equals, we're going to do x cubed, arrow to the right to get out of the exponent, plus x squared minus 5x minus 5. And I want to check to make sure that my zeros look right and my y-intercept looks right. So if I look right here, that looks like it's at about 2.2. This one crosses through exactly at -1, which is what we wanted. And then my other 0 looks like it's at about positive 2.2. And then I can double check here that it looks like it crosses through the y-axis at -5. So all my features check out. So the last thing I have to do is just kind of connect the dots, making sure my curve looks right. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to connect the dots. So it starts down here, crosses through the 0, goes through the y-intercept, and then back up through the purple one.